Meeting to order here. This is the financial management meeting. It's November 27th, 2023, 5 o'clock. Bob, would you mind kicking us off with the invocation, please?
Lord, we are so mindful of the fact that we have a responsibility to the people of this county. Help us to make decisions in your wisdom. We are so mindful of the fact that we long for the wisdom that comes from above. Be with us as we discern amongst ourselves what needs to be taken care of, and help us to build a county that is looking towards you. We're so grateful for the sacrifice that your Son made upon the cross that gave us the hope of eternal life. Be with us as we continue on the rest of this week. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'd like everybody to take a second to look over the agenda. Just note, I don't think we have everything that we discussed from last month, but we've got some more of that coming in the next meeting. But what we're going to cover today is in here. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We've got 57 minutes before some of these folks have to be across the hall to a commission meeting, right?
No.
Seven.
Seven? Oh, okay, so we have a little time. So we do have a little bit of time to recognize the public. I see there's a lot of folks here. If anybody has some comments or questions.
Laura Baker, 424 A.B. Wade Road in Portland. I just wanted to commend this committee on the work that you're doing. I think this is maybe one of the most important committees that exists. The duty of the legislative body at all levels is to manage the money of the county. And this has been seriously overlooked and not given the diligence that you all appear to be doing. And I commend you for that. And I know there's probably going to be some requests in here to fund some additional folks in the finance department. I think that's kind of long overdue, and I also think that that would be one of the wisest investments we could make, even though, as most of you know, I'm a huge watchdog with taxpayer dollars, but I think that in the long run it will really pay off, because we just do not have a good enough handle on all the ways that we spend money here, and having that consolidated in a system the way it should be, in the way any business would be managed. And finally, I would just say that one of the issues that was brought up in the discussions over the last couple of months is the withholding of pay for new employees. And I think it's going to be very painful to get through that transition for people who have worked for the county for a long period of time, but it has got to be done. In no other entity that handles money would people get paid in advance of their work. You wouldn't pay a contractor in your home, and we can't do that. And the only reason we've gotten away with it is because taxpayer dollars, and we're not accountable to the taxpayers. So we should be, but that's not been the attitude. And so I really appreciate what y'all are doing and bringing all this stuff out here and the work that you're going to be doing. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yes. All right, appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, your next regularly scheduled meeting is actually on, or is it the week before? It's actually the 3rd, so it's the 18th, and never mind, it's the week before. No, it's the 4th week, you're correct. It's actually scheduled the 25th, so you may want to look about rescheduling it.
Okay. Do we need to have a motion to reschedule it, or can we just do it?
We can just email out and reschedule with you guys, and you do it at night, either one you want to do.
Okay. Does 18th work for anybody, or push back to next year?
So I'm having a lot of trouble with Resource Authority because they've made their meetings on the 4th Monday night out at the Resource Authority location. So I've got to figure out something. I don't know if we can move, or if they can move, or if I can move away from them and somebody else can fill, but that's something we can handle offline.
Okay.
Is there any committees on the 3rd Monday at 5 or 6?
Usually that's general commission
Right, but I mean, is there any meetings before,
If we keep it 5 o'clock on Thursday.
five or six?
Yeah.
Because most times shorter, it may be good to put 6 o'clock right before the commission meeting. That way keep from that conflict and also another night meeting. You guys having to drive in another night would stop that too.
I bet we split the difference, say 5:30. Because honestly, with what we've got to do tonight, I don't know if 2 hours it might suffice, so. And I would hate to think that we would cut ourselves short
Mm-hmm.
on things that need to be done, because there's a lot of things that need to be done.
Do you want to set that as your regular schedule, the third Monday, that'd be right before county commission at 5:30?
And the commission starts at 7.
I'm gonna give you an hour and a half every Monday before the commission, and the commissioners will be here anyway.
I'm fine with that. Do we have time to move next month's up to the 18th, or
Yeah, there's plenty of time at this point. Renotice it and then get them.
do we need a motion, or we just send out a notice?
If you're in agreement, we can just go ahead and send it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to vote on it here, but yeah.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we move our regular scheduled meetings to the third Monday night at 5:30.
So, second.
All opposed, or all in favor? Opposed? All right. See everybody December 18th at 5:30. Everybody can look to page 2 and 3, the last meeting's minutes. It's quite a bit here, but like I said, I don't think we're gonna cover a few of the topics that are in here. I think Laura brought up one of the topics, and the policy stuff we've still gotta work offline. We won't be discussing today, but a few updates in there.
I got a question. So David, last meeting, we talked about getting a prioritized list of those needs in your department. Is that part of this packet?
Yeah, it's just, right here, I'm gonna go through it tonight.
Okay.
It's in priority order.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that.
Do you have a motion to approve the minutes?
So those are.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
You saw I'm abstaining, I wasn't here.
Yes.
Gotcha.
On the vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, gotcha. No report from the committee chair today, Mr. Mayor?
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Eric?
Just a little bit. I'm in the process of working with finance on trying to piggyback a change about moving some contracts into where there's a little bit more oversight. And while that's occurring, I'd like to up the limit we changed about 6 months ago for some breathing room on my end. I'd like to move it up to about 5 or 10,000. Because I don't see any, I haven't seen any contracts come across my desk to where there'd be any significant impact if something were to get through that couldn't be managed, but obviously it's y'all's discretion. And a couple of bullet points for guidance and how to approve lower amounts, but that's all I've got.
Can I make a comment about that? What we were talking about is, as Eric says, moving the limit up right now, because there is a cost to review all those. Number 2 is to put 4 bullet points with the most troublesome things that may be found in ones that are under the $5,000 or $10,000 limit. And then number 3, that all contracts that don't require approval be sent to finance. And there's a reasoning for that. Is one, if there is a problem later, if one of these under 5,000 or 10,000, and then number 2, we just complied with 2 GASB statements, and they were for leases and for software, and we had to have all those contracts with all those terms to determine those, and some of them were upwards of 10 years old, so we needed a way to get them at the front and put them into munis, because that is creating a significant issue. And my thought process was to actually bring up the limit on the legal review, because there's a certain amount of acceptable risk and there's a certain amount of costs to review these contracts. That's something you mentioned. But I thought it's something this committee might want to consider amending and sending forward tonight.
David, let me ask you, those below, say, 5,000, do we know the volume of those? Eric?
I would say, well, we got the $1,000 threshold now, which took quite a bit off the plate. But between the 1,000 and the 5, I would say probably 25 to 30% of them.
We've also got to look what constitutes a contract, what we've ran into too. So for instance, if basically it's legally binding and it has all the terms and enforceable, it creates a contract. So a PO and a sales order is usually enough to create a contract for the county. So that's what we're running into, but virtually everything in some form is creating a contract if you're not really careful. So there's more and more of them every day the closer we look. And I think the last one was somebody asked for a PO. And when we started looking at the PO and the sales contract, and it said, see the attached terms, and we started looking at those together, they definitely formed a very strong contract. But on the front, you just have a sales quote. So that's what kind of brought this about, because the number of them just increases every month when we start looking.
Right, so let me ask you, if we did raise the limit, and 5,000 may be the right number, I don't know. What is the downstream, what are the downstream controls if he doesn't review that?
Well, here's kind of my thought process. You put the $5,000 limit, then you say the departments are required to, any contracts they submit cannot contain hold harmless. What was the 4 things we talked about?
It was hold harmless. The biggest ones I run into is litigation has to be in Tennessee, the hold harmless, attorney's fees provisions, and ADR, which is alternative dispute resolution, like mediation, arbitration. Those are the 4 big ones.
And then at the same time, we'll scan them in finance if there is a problem, legal can look at them, because you really got to think, a $5,000 contract usually is just a $5,000 risk, but if we spend $250, $500 reviewing every one of those, the cost risk benefit analysis goes way down.
No, I'm with you, I'm just trying to understand what the downstream controls are.
We'll have them scanned in, but the thing is, us reviewing is gonna take time too if we did, so we're going to put that requirement on the departments, and we'll just scan as we go in. If we happen to see one, we'll reject them back.
Would that be, would there be some audit element of that, like internal audit? Would they look at those downstream, or is that part of maybe a comptroller's review, or is the scope too small for that, or?
Well, we don't have an internal audit, and then our people are more looking to make sure invoices and POs, and it's reviewed by legal, so that's something we're gonna discuss if we can kind of skim through it because of the volume right now with the other stuff, but.
And I will say that's something I encounter more often than I like is I'll be given nothing but a purchase order, and I'll say, all right, well, there's no legal problems with this, it's just a purchase order. I don't find out there's a contract until finance gets back with me, because they've scrutinized the purchase order and the invoice statement from the vendor, and then lo and behold, there's this. So we kind of have an audit trigger there in both of us trying to overlap.
So if you request a PO, we ask for a contract if it exists already, but we probably need it in policy. And if we find a sales invoice, we've asked now for all the terms and conditions to be sent, because with this GASB for the leases and the software, we had significant issues because we, in the past, legal reviewed every contract, so they would sign on what they got. And then we also had sales invoices, and it would say, see attached terms, where we couldn't get into the accounts, and the departments had issues getting into the accounts because they were older.
Right.
So it's kind of created this issue that we need to fix. We fixed it this year. It took a lot of time to fix it going forward, where we have all of it. And then right now, I just honestly think the amount of time being reviewed on the contracts, the cost benefit, this isn't there. We're spending more money reviewing than potential problems, because if one got through with a problem and we lost in court and say we thought it should be 2 and they thought it should be 4, we've lost $2,000. But if we spend $25,000 worth of staff time,
Right, I mean, but if you're
surpassed.
from a purchasing perspective, you're matching those at the end.
Well, we're matching them else at the PO or at the payment.
Right,
And
I mean, that element, that control is there.
Yeah, we're gonna put in, well, that's one of the discussions here, we're right now putting in, we've always kept them with the PO or the payment. We're actually gonna set up, we're trying to set up the Munis contract module and assign numbers to them.
Gotcha.
That way we can trace them back and have an index of them.
So you'll just articulate that through a policy in terms of what the contract owner is responsible for?
Yeah, that's what we're saying. We'd like for us and Mr. Sittler work and bring back a policy next
Gotcha.
month to see if the committee could go ahead and run it back to commission.
Well, we would, I mean, my ruthers would be to see the policy before we approve the move on the authorization level.
Right, and it's kind of the gist of what I just said, but you don't have it in front of you. Yes.
Gotcha, yes, thank you.
So can we just bring one back next month?
Yeah.
And I have a slight question. Are we using boilerplate contracts for some of these things, or?
We don't generally create the contracts. I'm reviewing contracts from the vendor, and,
So
which
there's-
is customary, because they're the ones trying to shield themselves. So
Right.
that's what I'm having to go through, so I'm not looking at the same thing twice.
The biggest one we see is hold harmless or multi-year contracts that's not subject to appropriation.
I understand
If they're
that.
not subject to appropriation, they require county commission's approval. That's another one we need to probably put on their file. That's the one we run into the most. You'll go back and you'll have a sales, but if you hit the terms and conditions, it'll end up being a 36-month agreement for payment, so it's what we're running into right now.
Okay.
Superintendent?
David, do we, on those hold harmless, I know, like, for instance, us, like, we try not to sign anything that has a hold harmless.
We don't, because there's an AG opinion that says that that's extending the full faith and credit of the county. So the only way we would do it if the county commission approved that. But right now, we just refuse hold harmless.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So that's why we wanted the policy for them to work for all those.
Any further discussion? All right, we've got as a follow-up, Eric and Dave are gonna work on what that policy would look like, increasing, I think I've got 5,000, is that the request at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and if we could get any, I guess, numbers behind that of how many, just estimate, how many contracts and time savings and,
Well, the total number of something that forms a contract over years is probably well into the thousands right now. If you
okay.
really start.
As far as man hours, yeah.
No, I mean contracts, when you really get into them. Start doing all the payments that we got, and they've got some kind of contractor.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of them, so, yeah, but I think the $5,000 and the 5 bullet points for the departments, and then copies to finance is what we're kind of
Okay.
requesting.
And just for my knowledge, this would not just be for the legal department, this would be for all departments?
Well, you would recommend it to the county commission for a countywide policy.
Okay, countywide policy change, not just for the legal department?
Right, because the $1,000 is for all contracted with the legal.
That's, well, as soon as you said thousands, I was like,
Oh, yeah, this is for
Can't just-
every one that goes through the office a year.
gotcha.
Yeah, we've got thousands upon thousands of payments. And that number may be higher or low, I don't know, it would be hard to say without putting on the payments. And then we'd have to eliminate redundant payments, so.
Yeah.
That would come by.
I think it would help to,
We just know it's an increasing number and it's straining them on their end and us on our end too to get them through.
yeah, and also to Todd's point, if there's any controls we can think through.
And that'll be discussed in here, we can look at the
Okay.
business contract management module, yeah.
All right. Moving on, report of the trustee.
Okay, what? David asked for me to attend this meeting.
That's a request.
and
Okay.
I think it was a request about how the investments were being chosen, and it may be best addressed. And when I get to my report, I may go out of order, because we actually have the 2012 Act Investment Committee and authorized investments. I could go over those at the same time if you want me to.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, Cindy, and,
I have an actual updated,
okay, that
List.
maybe answers my question.
I only ran like half a dozen copies,
That's
but
okay.
it's got the most recent
Okay.
rates and everything.
I think his question was on how, the big question, if I recall from the minutes, was how was the investment selected? And I was about 90% sure how you were selecting, but I didn't want to state. I think that's what
Right, we
was
send
asked.
out, I send out an email to all of our local banks that we do business with. We have great working relationships with just about all of them. And take bids on our funds. And whoever gives me the best deal, that's who gets the money.
So now, when you say deal, can you define what deal means?
Well, whoever gives me the best rate and the best terms. Generally, if it's a CD, they might give me a rate for 6 months and another rate for 12 months. Generally, the longer the term, the higher the rate is. And then there's different amounts. It's usually after we get some excess funds, because we have to wait till, the account starts getting built back up from property tax collections. And then we place our money. We've got several money markets. Some of that's bond money. And we have to watch that closely. David can tell you about that.
On the money market, we match them with the disbursements on the bond because we gotta do arbitrage yield calculations for those. So
Right.
that's how those are matched, that they're taken from the inception and then the account's maintained till the bonds are closed.
Right. And the bid process that you mentioned, is
Yes.
that memorialized? I mean, you've got records that indicate
Yes.
that?
Mhm.
Okay. Is that reviewed in terms of compliance by anybody?
She does those herself because we don't have a investment committee, but also, the one you asked about last month, the bank account, it's actually bid on each term. And
Okay.
there's
Yeah,
some
our main
statutory
operating
requirements on
public
it.
funds account, I have to review our banking once a term.
Right.
And I will send out emails asking for, you know, what the banks would be offering. I review those bids, I guess you would call them. And if what we're earning at the time and everything that's included with that is still superior, we just keep it. If this last time, we'd had our main public funds account with First Horizon Bank for 30-something years through 3 trustees back. And they had always given us the best deal on our public funds account. This last time, I had several very aggressive offers, and so we did a formal RFP and opened the bids and reviewed them, and Pinnacle Bank actually beat everybody. And so we had to change our public funds account to Pinnacle. And so far, we're doing great with it. I think right now, we're getting $538 on the public funds account.
And you've got two, this is on the October balance sheet, you've got two, you've got First Horizon Bank that was 66 million and then Pinnacle at 46 million. Are those the two which you consider your day-to-day accounts or?
Yes, we've switched all of our collections all of our collections from property tax and all the other departments now are receipted and sent to Pinnacle. We still had quite a bit of funds in First Horizon that are still there. They do collect property taxes for us as well, so there is money continually going into First Horizon as well.
Mr. Kerr, we did work, or me and the trustee did work on that particular bid together.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it was it had cost, and based on different cutoff levels, it had prime rates and various other offers that were offering, so we did a very, I guess, in-depth calculation on
Right.
that, plus the cost of switching accounts to determine the Pinnacle was the
Gotcha.
best value. So that one we did do quite a bit of work on.
Yeah, just two final questions. At the last meeting, Cindy, we had talked about those two accounts. At least on your balance sheet, it doesn't indicate that at least there's no interest rate articulated on those two accounts.
Oh,
Do
okay.
we get return, I mean, are those in actively invested accounts?
Yeah, they've got, let's see.
They get prime
This is
plus.
what he's looking at right here.
Oh,
Those-
okay.
those are the ones
Well, we
based
can
on
start
prime.
adding that. Right now, Pinnacle's getting 538. Did you get a new updated sheet here?
They get prime, don't they, Cindy, based on?
And I don't think
prime?
it's on, these are just investments, not our operating
But-
accounts,
but-
but the, Pinnacle's getting 538 and First Horizon's getting might be 545. I'd have
I
to
mean, they're
look, I can't
competitive
remember.
rates, it sounds.
I think they get those rates based on so many dollars are at prime plus and so many dollars
Right.
at prime. After we keep so many,
Yeah,
in there, it goes
Fed
to prime
funds
minus,
plus.
you know.
Mhm.
And then they have a sweep account, they sweep it in and out each night and pay less interest on it, so that 5.4 is sort of what it is.
Yeah, and it would be helpful if you could add that.
We absolutely
That way
will.
It's
Sure.
just transparent. Last question, I promise.
Mhm.
On all of these banks that you've got,
Mhm.
is there some kind of stress test on these banks? Do we know that these banks are not at risk of collapsing or?
No, they are all in the collateral pool. We will not put money in a
Okay.
bank that's not in the collateral pool.
Gotcha.
That way it's secured at 105%, I think.
And who secures that?
The
It's the state.
It's a state.
the state.
State.
It's
Mhm.
the state. The state has to do it, or they have to have securities in the county's name at certain quality, or it can be the investment pool. It's gotta be one or the other, and then we've
So
got to
that we
identify
make
it.
sure all the funds are secure.
And that's a statutory requirement for all counties in Tennessee.
Okay, great, thank you.
One question. Sure. All of these right here are short-term. Have we made any decision as to whether we would go long-term?
You can't, and that's why we've got this statute on acceptable investments. The things you can invest over 2 years has to be from basically sales or certain things, and it also can't be more than 20% of your idle funds, of your smallest fund over the past year or at the time of your investment. And we have a fund called the Courthouse Jail Maintenance Fund that has about $300,000 in it. So anything over 5 years would be somewhere below $60,000 over 2 years. I'm sorry. And if you read through, there's a whole lot of limits, and with the feds losing AAA rating by the other day, or the other month, whenever, several of these investments of theirs are no longer, because we got a letter the other day
Right.
reminding us of the statutory
From the
requirement.
comptroller saying that we could not invest in.
If you read back in the statutes, they've got to be the best rating by 2 nationally recognized, and they're not. So they're kicked out. So right now, we're very limited on what you can do on time and type. And I included those down here later for you guys. You'll probably want to spend some time at home going through them because they're very convoluted and twisted. You have to read back and forth on it a bunch of times to make sense out of it. That's the way people do deposits for taxes. You gotta have so much in them. That one's at the top, I was looking at, for sure. The cash you keep in them, that's because we keep those accounts, that's because that's where you take taxes.
Right, they collect property taxes for us. We have accounts at all of those banks. And it's actually very helpful because it keeps a lot of the traffic out of the office when we're just slammed.
Okay.
And it, of course, helps the banks too. They're using that money as they take payments, then every 3 days they mail us the paperwork so that we can process it in the system. And then we transfer the money out.
That way you don't have to
Into
drive
the
out of
operating
this office.
account.
Gotcha.
You
Just
can,
a minimum.
you can
And then a lot of
drive one
people are
those
afraid of
banks.
the mail now, so.
So basically, you can drive to one of those accounts and pay your property
Right.
taxes. It's a big, they do it for nothing,
It's
pretty
very
much.
convenient for the people that live like in Portland and Westmoreland and
Okay.
White House and Goodlettsville. They can just go to the bank and pay the taxes and the bank send us the paperwork and we process it.
Okay.
And you can also pay online,
And you can pay online.
but there's a fee on it,
Yes.
yeah, you gotta use a credit card or something of that nature.
And then we get all our big mortgage payments in December because they hold on to your money till the very last second.
Right before they come to work.
Yeah.
Or right before the taxes, they go for taxes. They do them delinquent in March.
So David, let me ask you on this investment committee, what are the next steps? I mean, do you have a charter in place, or is that something you're gonna develop, or?
It's under B, the statute says the county commission can form an investment committee, so basically what you would do, just recommend them form an investment committee. The 2012 Act says that this committee forms the policies and procedures for it, and then the authorized investments are attached here too. It tells you what you can invest in for links and amounts. So basically, you would form a committee to work with the trustee for investing, but as we're saying right now, your investments are really limited pretty much to those CDs, the state investment pool, money market accounts, and there's probably a few others, but they've got to be, if you look, they're going to be AAA rated. So we'd actually have to go out and look at all those investments.
When it comes to bonds, though, I mean, that's a little different portfolio, right? I mean,
Right.
So,
Buy bonds at the state.
yeah. So, are the rules the same in terms of looking at liquidity, term, and duration of the bond, and whether premium, or probably not a premium at this point? I mean, is that part of the portfolio that you bid those bonds out like you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, whenever they issue the bonds and I.
She hasn't bought any bonds, that's what I'm saying. We're not buying any state, she's not buying
Oh, I
investments
thought
in
you
any.
oh.
Right, you can buy certain bonds, but she's not bought any of those.
Now, my
Oh,
question
no.
is just process.
When we're issuing bonds or?
Well, yeah,
bonds?
issuing
The
bonds.
process to go through to get a bond. Do
Oh,
you go
when we,
through the same?
when you issue a bond or when
Yes.
you're buying? When we issue a bond, it goes through finance and the mayor.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll actually hire a financial advisor and we'll actually do sealed bids on the bond and get, counsel involved. So we'll go out and get the lowest true interest cost.
I got you.
So generally, all of our bonds for several years have had significant premiums because the true interest cost most of the time comes in lower with the premiums involved.
So we use
issue
an
a lower
investment
bond.
advisor to do that?
Yes, because they actually have this, then we wouldn't want to buy the software, it's very expensive.
So,
Yeah. We outsource that work, and I think every county in the state does. I would not recommend trying to do that in-house. We probably wouldn't work out well for cost. But you can buy certain bonds too, I thought that might be, and they're under that statute, it's under page 35 to 37, which ones you can and can't. For what length.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Cindy.
Since we still have the trustee here, and if you're okay with it, do you want me to go down to the section B under my report, page 33, 34, and 35 and 37? We can just briefly go through those, that way I'm sure she may not want to be here for the whole discussion. If that's okay with the committee members. And I try to just attach all the pertinent stuff, and this is what I looked at for the investment committee, is your 2012 Act. It says, the 2012 Finance Committee shall recommend policies and procedures for cash management and investment of idle cash funds as prescribed by law. Such recommendations shall be approved by the majority vote of the county legislative body. And if you go to the following page, which is on the back of mine, I think it's probably the same way. It actually says Committee on Investments, and it goes in the, it says for the purpose, the county legislative body of several counties may appoint a committee with authority to designate the types of investments and amount of those investments. And I believe it says they don't have to be commissioners, I have to read on. Says just that they may appoint an investment committee. So basically, it would come through this committee recommending the county commission appointing whoever they appointed.
So are you looking for a motion to do that?
If you want to go forward, you probably
Yes.
need to create a resolution for them to create an investment committee, and then you need to have them, or you have a recommendation of what's going to constitute who's in the investment committee.
So I'll make the recommendation. Yeah.
Any further discussion on the topic? I just had one question. Are there any other counties that currently have an investment committee that you can think of?
I'm sure they do. I could go out and call. We could have some called tomorrow. We haven't. That's something we haven't been asked before. See how it went out and
Okay.
really pulled it.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're in a unique time where money's starting to make money again, and I want to be as financially responsible, but then at the same time, if we're limited in the scope of what we can purchase and, you know, we've got a good handle on the economics behind it, adding another committee may not be the right move, so. I'm
I
good.
did speak with one of my bankers today, and she told me that it looks like things are gonna be level for a little while.
Okay,
Because the last meeting, the feds did not increase the interest rate,
okay,
which they had been doing because of inflation, but they did not do an increase, so she feels like it might stay level for a little while,
okay.
unless some major catastrophe happens.
Would you maybe want to put this on old business for next month and give all the committee members time to think, and we'll also go back and determine, my understanding is I'll have to go back and verify that they don't have to be members of the commission, so if that's correct, then technically this committee plus the trustee could be your investment committee. But that may be something we want to go back and research 100% to make sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't really say here, it says the county legislative body shall appoint. And there was a section for the state and they we pulled out.
So at the next meeting, you come back with a recommendation on who and how this is formed? Is that-
We'll determine who can be in there, and the next month, you guys be thinking if you want
Okay,
to do this. Since you would probably not want to form another committee, it may be best to make the financial management committee, the investment committee, and possibly include the trustee. I don't know if you want to consider that or not, the 12 Act plus the trustee, but I don't know.
And if we're doing that, and I do like that idea, can we have something from legal as far as the resolution we could hand to legislation? So if we meet in December, and we can form this committee that Mr. Long's talking about, could we have a resolution to hand off to legislation then to approve?
I'm about 100% sure on that. I just want Eric to verify that it
I
can be
know, I
anybody. That it can be anybody.
So, ask that one more time.
I was just simply asking if, I like the idea of this committee being the investment committee. I was just wondering if your office could draft us up a resolution to look at next month in December when we,
Yes.
if we can do it, will you bring us a draft back?
Yeah, I've already got that down to do.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And then your next one is actually the authorized investments. If you look, it's quite a long statute and it has a lot of limitations, and that's maybe something you want to look at before the next meeting. Because there's certain things like if you look, certain of the investments have to be AAA, certain investments of the Fed have to be the highest rated by 2 nationally recognized rating agencies, and I think there's 3 actually, but 2 of the 3. So there's a whole lot of requirements, and then there's also, as you're saying, looking back at the subsection, maybe when you come back for questions for us to answer, like if you go to page, the second page of the actual investment one, and you look at C1, that's where it limits what you can, your time you can invest. It says not more than 20% of the lowest idle fund balance in the past 5 years, or 20% of the idle funds available at the same investment, whichever is less. Maybe invest in maturities greater than 2 years, but not greater than 5. So it limits you down to 5 right there. So you couldn't have anything past 5 for 60, and then there's a whole bunch of limitings between that gauge too. About and then you go back up here and it talks about sales and other one-time monies and bonds. And the reason on the bonds is we leave them in the money market versus moving them. We need to trace them. Plus, if we earn excess, it gets rebated to the IRS anyway.
If we buy longer, this may be a silly question, if we buy longer duration bonds that are more than 5 years but can call or can sell them, is that considered a 5, or is that just like a CD?
Maturity is what it says. It says, I think it says maturity of, so that would be final maturity because we had that.
Okay.
Which is less than base of 2 years, but not greater than 5 from the investment. I believe it was 5 because I think we actually, when we were looking at this several years ago, we were discussing that, and I think the consensus was that it would be the final maturity on the bond.
Okay, not just being.
Not being callable,
Okay.
right? If it was callable, and then same time if you bought.
Sellable, yeah, just liquid.
Well, you could sell most of these bonds. You could sell anytime anyway. You could put them back on the
That's what I
market.
mean, yeah. The CDs are the only ones that actually have like a fixed term.
But we can look at that and kind of
Okay.
consult with county technical what their thought process in the state, because I believe the director of local finance we worked with last time, they have to approve some of these. Whether their office, for a better word, polices this, unless it's changed, because I worked with them last time quite a bit. We were looking at the hospital sale proceeds to see what could be done with it, and we determined it was so restricted that it wasn't feasible for that $30 million to actually go anywhere that could make any funds past the CD, was what it ended up being at the end of the day. We spent, I don't know, several meetings on it. But any of the questions you got, if you can send them to me, I can forward them on to technical and work with Eric and try to figure our answers out, or move on forward with it.
This is more of a process question, David. On the authorized investments, do you envision this being memorialized into the policy that we would have as an investment committee?
I think that's what we would do, try to simplify it and go back and calculate the 20%.
Gotcha.
Find out what falls into the gaps, and then right now it talks about some federal investments with 2 being rated by two of them at the highest, which is no longer the case anymore because the feds themselves don't have a AAA rating. And I think that's the letter we got the other day was about those, if I'm not mistaken. So there's several investments we can't do because of what happened with the federal government and their rating. It's made it even more difficult. So the good thing is we didn't have any of it at the time when that happened, so we would have got rid of them.
David, I was just noticing here under C3, it says that the investment committee may approve investment in maturities of greater than 5 years.
But there's limits on down there what those fives are, yeah.
The dollar amount?
No, if you go on down there, yeah, but if they're over that, they're limited on which ones we can and how much and what balances. Let me stop. You gotta read the whole section through the thing, bounces around everywhere. I remember this thing from years ago, we spent time on it. If I pull it back out here, share my page. What page is it on? Page 35? There we go. Which one was you talking about, Bob? C?
Well, it's under C3.
It says also approved by the comptroller of the treasury or designee, the individual fund shall submit to the director in writing an unusual occurrence that generated the idle fund. See, if you're gonna do that, you actually had to have some unusual occurrence if you're gonna be investing those. Because earlier sections cover sales and a whole bunch of stuff, so it's gonna have to be some kind of legal settlement or something unusual.
So if you had something you had to pay in 10 years, and you needed to put the money aside for 10 years.
It's gonna have to be something very unusual, and they're gonna have to approve it, because when we started talking to them years ago about the hospital sale, because it talks about sales, and I think that was even before Mr. Langford was on the commission, I believe. It's been at least 10 years ago. They would not, they told us they absolutely would not at the time approve investments past 5 years for us because we didn't have that circumstance. It has to be unusual. That sale of the hospital proceeds fall back under sales. And then they also told us our other limiting factor was the section C1. It says between 2 and 5 is 20% of the lowest idle fund, which would be courthouse and jail maintenance fund. So anything 2 to 5 is going to be below $60,000. So it puts you back to 2. So the majority of our funds are going to be held back at 2 years as far as investments go. And then we'll have to pull ratings for all the ones we do, several ones have to pull ratings and see what they qualify as. So if you find an investment that looks good, then, but the problem is I don't think we're gonna get a lot of length on a lot of these.
I mean, it refers back to A2, where it says the idle county funds derived from sales of assets, settlements, or other infrequent or an unusual occurrences shall be invested. Yeah, and to me, that doesn't make it sound like we've got some oddball situation going on. It's just that we've got this money that's sitting here.
But it has to be but it has to be something unusual to do past 5 years. Very, very unusual. They told me maybe if we had a court settlement, or they were giving me some really far out examples, because that statute says it has to be approved by the comptroller. Now, if we work out good policies and we send them in, they may do something different, but that's something we'll have to get their approval. And then the other thing, you've got to realize that if we buy some of these bonds, they're actually going to have to be shown at fair value. So based on market changes and interest rates, you may show unrealized gains and losses. So your financial statements, if we invested $30 million and interest rates worked against us, we could end up showing an unrealized gain or loss on our financials of $100,000, which was, and had to footnote it, which would be something you guys would have to explain. It would be kind of hard to, that's something you run into too, just to make you aware of it under
I
GAAP.
mean, it's just.
It gets very,
A little above 5%,
because,
it's possible.
these really short term, like Cindy's buying, don't have to be shown at market value. That's one of those
I know
advantages.
with these
to
large amounts, you can get a good interest rate, but
the
it'd
lane.
just be nice to be able to get something.
The other thing's killing you, yours are collateralized. We could go to an online bank and find better rates than Cindy's got, but they wouldn't be collateralized, and we'd have to get them collateralized, which would bring down the yield. So her yields are good. The reason they're lower than some of the stuff you see is that, and the other thing, some of the online banks, we'd have to see if they're part of the investment pool or actually, so that's where we're
I
running
mean, I was
stuff.
just looking at some of these amounts, they're just block amounts, 10,000 or 10 million, 5 million, something like that.
Back in 08, 09, the weird circumstance happened where we couldn't actually find banks that would take our cash for investments. They were wanting to leave in the bank
And
account for no
during
interest.
COVID, oh my gosh,
It was very, we would call them
it cost them
and
more
try to get them to
insure
bid, and they're
than
saying, we don't want your funds right
it's
now
worth.
for a while there. So right now, we're in a good situation, but I'm not sure. Like, if you look online, I'm sure you can find online banks with better rates, but they're not collateralized. If they are, it's gonna keep those rates down. And if we can find them collateralized, they may be better. That's something we'd have to research heavily. Because, usually your online banks are cheaper because they have no storefronts or no banks. And that's something, Cindy, I'm sure she'd be happy to look at, but that's something at the same time, she's wanting the 105% rule. It's gotta be in the collateral pool, or they gotta be 105%. I think they've gotta be in the county's names and as a certain type of investment. But and Cindy may remember off the top of her head, but I can't remember the exact details. That's the gist of it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I think we've got a follow-up for Eric to bring a draft resolution to the December meeting, and we'll continue the conversation there. Jump back to A.
And we go back to, let's go A,
And if I can, if we're finished with the trustee, can we,
well, that's what I was going to do. That's what my purpose was to do.
I know, so now.
I thought she would just slip out after that, to be
Yes.
honest.
Thank you for your time, Cindy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And since these are all under my report, since we've got some of the EMS people here, can we actually talk about 41 and 46?
Yep.
Okay. EMS has had a lot of turnover in staff. They sent, I think, 4 pieces of equipment to a vendor. They didn't realize at the time, but the vendor actually went bankrupt somewhere back in 2021. When they were reporting them to us as fixed assets, they inadvertently didn't realize those assets were no longer here. They've reported them to this year, so what I'm requesting, because, the assets probably had a 5-year life, they're at 2.5, but they had issues. They said they were non-repairable. We don't know if that's 100% true, but where I'm at right now, we've got assets that need to be removed from our books. So what I'm asking is this committee to recommend to the county commission to surplus these assets as lost. Talking to Eric and Steve, at this point, there's no chance of getting them back. They have an undeterminable market value, and there's been no theft or anything of that nature. It's basically they didn't realize the company. They found the letter now. The asset's gone, and they didn't realize they just hadn't been reported. So what I'm asking is for this committee to send next month to county, or to, it goes to legislation next, that is, to do a recommendation to the legislative committee to declare these lost, to remove them from the books.
So are they 100% depreciated?
We wrote the rest of them off this year. They were getting pretty close, but we just went ahead and removed them from our books at this point, but we needed some kind of authorization.
What was the original value of these?
They were 37, and we have an estimated 5-year life. They were 2.5 years out. They sent them to the vendor. I think there was like 2 of them had the same issues and maybe 2 more issues. The vendor said they were non-repairable. So at that point, the commission may have wanted to surplus them versus sending them back, but at this point, we're 2 years down the road, so we just need some way to get them off our books. We just need to surplus them out of there.
Is this the same vendor that doesn't operate anymore?
Yeah, the one that went bankrupt.
Yeah, that's the other problem.
Yeah.
The vendor ceased to
Yeah,
exist.
these are the ones
21,
that
so
had
those have been
it's not
sold
recoverable.
or
They had the
melted
belts
down or-
that are no longer being made for the compression. So
That's
it's,
correct.
Yeah.
Same ones we replaced.
yeah, that's what, I remember that discussion when we were in budget, but
We're just asking for you guys to give a recommendation on the legislature to go and get the commission to
I'll make a
write these
motion.
things off.
Well, yeah, I'm there on doing that. I think it would be helpful to articulate what the original value of these assets were and the fact that
37,000.
they're down to nothing.
37 at the time they sent them, they would have been, 18, but they had repairs. Even if they were repairable, you're talking 4, 5, 6, so that
So
was
there's
about
no salvage
13.
value to these
And
assets.
as I'm saying, they were telling these guys that some of the parts, like, if you look at one on the face, it looks repairable, say cable, but my understanding is some of the parts to hook the cable, whatever, is no longer made. So the things were basically junk. So what happened is they just missed sending it up to us and reporting to the commission at the time that they were, for a better word, junk or salvage. So we're just asking for that to be done now.
Does this happen a lot?
No, it rarely happens. We've had other ones, but they've been completely depreciated. We could figure out what happened to them. They were basically broken and not of the original value.
and
neither.
as I remember, there was a situation where they were looking for other people to make the belts, but then they wouldn't accept the liability to,
And another thing, the EMS has a lot of equipment and a lot of ambulances, so when they report to us every year, we ask them to report deletions, ads, and whatever, because this one was shipped off versus surplus through the usual process, they missed it. And then when our person started asking where was it surplus or lost, they went back and looked at the records and figured out it was lost back in 21. So we're just asking to basically dispose of it now. Probably the same outcome. We just need to get it off the books, so.
We do have a
Mr. Chairman, I
motion.
second the motion on the floor.
Any further discussion? We got a motion, a second?
You need a second?
Oh, we got a second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, send it to commission.
The next items is that way the EMS don't have to.
It's going to legislative.
Oh, sorry, send it to legislature.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the other one about the receivables, if you want me to mention that, just since Mr. Poss was here, but he wasn't here at the time, but we'll talk about it afterwards, he's not. But, let's see. Page 6 through 19 is just the original 2012 Act, but everybody will have a copy, because I've had questions about when it was adopted and written, so I've tried to include that. And then on page 20 through 25 is the 2019 amendment. And basically what it did was made the schools optional, and as long as we're trying to progress toward implementation of the remaining sections, then we will not be in non-compliance. So we just need to keep forward. It says basically two things. The committee will monitor, and we'll keep moving forward. We originally did an implementation plan, but I brought you a kind of a shortened, modified version here that should keep us in compliance and some kind of recommendations. But if everybody's good with item A, 1, and 2, I'll go ahead and go to item 3.
I'm good.
Okay.
yeah.
What it does is the same thing Todd asked for last month. First, it goes through here, and if you go on back here, it'll start, when we get to it, it'll start prioritizing your goals. But at the beginning, if you look, I went back, and what I've done is I try to prioritize the goals, tell you everything that we need to implement at this point, and give you some decent estimates, because we still got to talk to the vendor about certain things of when it would take to get the full act in. If you look on the very first two paragraphs, it's basically just the verbiage telling you the things I just told you and including the list. Section 21 is the one I was telling you about, where it says as long as this committee is evaluating it and we're trying to work forward to it internally and through this committee, then we won't be in violation. But I think we have to be at least trying to move forward on a decent pace. And that's what I think this memo will help with.
That's one of the things that's kind of bothering me. This is 11 years now.
It started in 2012 was the adoption. At the time, it included the school, and we went through several things, and we actually had the software in part of the school here. At the time, they decided to temporarily bring the school back, and then there was a discussion in 2019, because things just kept carrying on, that it may be better to make the schools optional to go ahead and do the rest of it.
Yeah.
And give us a little longer time frame, because we're doing a lot of software. Well, at that time in 2019, right after that COVID happened, so it kind of threw the committees. We quit meeting, committees quit meeting because everybody was masking up and remotely. So it slowed everything down. So now COVID's gone. We got the committee willing to start looking. So I think it's the time to start trying to move forward and
Definitely.
probably complete the next thing anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years. That would be, and there's several pieces here, because what you've really got is a private active with full-on ERP system. Consolidate everything but the schools, and it's a full-on ERP where everything will be to the most feasible possible electronic. And I can talk about some of the limitations on that tonight, because there's some statutory limitations, but I can kind of go through those tonight with you too. The first thing is, we think to move forward on this, we're going to need one additional full-time staff member. And where the full-time staff member would be was when we transition highway over to do their bidding and to do their purchasing. It would be a half a person. We think it would be a half a person if we moved the bid limit from $10,000 to $25,000. Because right now we have a lot of bids that would get rid of some of the smaller dollar bids. What we could do is one of two things. I think we should just move it on to 25. We could require quotes from 10 to 25, but in the past, the quotes have been about as much as getting bids when you go into it. Because most of these departments have very few funds, so they're going to be calling anyway, and then we look at the quotes. Item number 2, when we did do that, if we do that, we could eliminate about $12,000 of consulting fees. Right now, we've been trying to use consultants to help implement the ERP system, the Chronos portion. A couple of things we run into is the amount of internal time we're spending. It about takes the same amount of time, plus the consultants are busy, so they're not necessarily available. Also, our understanding is we do quite a bit of overtime in finance. If we pulled the additional person in, we would try to alleviate about $5,000 of that overtime. Right now, we're running pretty heavy on, and for the last year, turnover in finance has been reasonably good. I would say last year, before that was pretty bad. Item number 2, I would recommend myself, because I can be the purchasing agent or recommending one of the deputies in my office. My recommendation would be to make one of the deputies the purchasing agent. And I've got one selected up there that would be a good purchasing agent. And then also put the halftime, the other half of that person halftime under this person. Item number 3 is
David, would that be a full-time position?
full-time split half and half between those two duties, yeah.
Okay.
Originally, I said a full-time for the purchasing, but if we're going to lower the bid limit, I think we could get by with a half a person. And we'll come back and let the committee know how that's going.
Gotcha.
I think when we get all this implementation done, our staffing with an additional person will be fine, but I think over the next several years, we're still gonna be running a lot of comp and overtime because implementations, you got your regular job and a new job. And you can't let the regular one fall because that's worse than letting the implementation fall. Because you day-to-day don't happen, or you don't pay taxes, or there's been instances of that. That's why we're slow walking it. We prioritize day-to-day over the implementation. And it's very important, but we gotta make sure it happens too.
Just a quick, I think it looks like it's section 11, not section 10 and number 2.
I'm sorry, did I read it too quick?
Oh, I just was looking at the policy, I think refers to section 11, not section 10.
Over
Yeah, section 10 is school finance director, section 11 is purchasing agent.
sorry, I grabbed the wrong one, didn't I? I'll start briefing that real quick.
Oh, I'm just looking at this, which one are you looking at?
Yeah, it should be 11. The private act would be right. Probably ran through it real quick, I was trying to refer.
No worries, I was just trying to read it while you were going through it.
I quoted it though. But the second thing would be, we need this committee to basically send their recommendation back to the subcommittee for full implementation. Basically this, with any amendments tonight, send over to the subcommittee to start working on all the policies that we need to work on slowly. Probably purchasing first, and then as I mentioned down through here, we need to adopt some timekeeping policies for the Chronos system. We have none of those right now. We went to a completely electronic in several departments. We have personnel policies, but there needs to be some other policies. And kind of like something I was talking to Miss Commissioner Boyd this evening, none of the personnel policies system-wide addresses how you treat exempt employees. That may be something that needs to be looked at too. You don't want to destroy their exemption, but all your exempt employees other than elected or like elected officials or the clerk and master or the administrator of elections aren't sick and vacation time. So you need some kind of, that doesn't destroy their exemption, some kind of reasonable policy of how that's handled. Because if you ask 5 different exempt people, you're going to get 5 different answers, because I've asked them. And they're all doing it different. The timekeeping.
And if we can stop just for a moment with the subcommittee, I think we've touched on it a couple of times. I was just wondering, I assume as chairman, you would call the subcommittee because they don't meet routinely? Can
Yeah, I
we,
think we're waiting on all this to get,
so at the end of this
finalized.
meeting, today we'll,
we can call
And me and Toby met this morning. We've been kind of tied up, our schedules are busy, so yeah, we did meet this morning. We've been talking about it since the last meeting, things just keeps happening, but,
I was thinking about the policy committee.
yeah, so we need to meet, the policy subcommittee needs to meet.
So I was just asking, is that December or January? What are we thinking?
Probably think January.
first of January.
Well, December's gonna be hard with everybody on.
Christmas, yeah.
Probably wanna do it January. Because I've just tried to coordinate meetings in December before and they don't work out well, even with 5 people. And then number 2 is, just like she mentioned right now, it's a hard change to change people's pay cycle, but the first thing, we've looked at the Chronos system and we can set up the separation. We want the policy to come back from the policy subcommittee and you guys that any new full-time employees will require a reasonable holdback period of 5 to 7 days. So like if your existing employees will keep doing the way we're doing it, even though it's painful for a while till we figure out what to do. But the new ones, we want to get a holdback policy starting as soon as they're on Chronos. And then the other thing is, at some point, we're actually paying people on Friday for Thursday. We probably need to move that back to Friday. Friday, even though it's not a huge change, it's still a little bit of a change toward the right direction. It got moved back to Thursday, probably by me, because we used to have checks that were paper and a direct deposit. If you're direct deposit, you got paid a day earlier. And then county commission adopted a policy countywide that it all has to be direct deposits because of the cost and the issue. So that was kind of an old thing that was done at one point to incentivize everybody to do direct deposit. And we're 100% direct deposit. We don't do checks anymore, unless they steal your account or something temporary we'll do.
Yeah, I want to ask Mayor, what do you think about that moving it to one day to Friday? I mean, is that going to be a big disruption?
I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
What's the best way to communicate that?
We would just send a communication out with payroll.
We'll send out
You
payroll.
You'd have a point in time.
Yeah, give them a time that, hey, it's not gonna be in your account on Thursdays anymore, it's gonna be on Fridays. And they make adjustments.
Gotcha.
What I'd recommend is immediately adopting the policy for as soon as you go to Kronos and the ones on, that they're required to have, and several of them are already on there, like my office, that all the new employees have to have a holdback, and we'll start, when they send out the new employee, we'll hold them back a week. So instead of getting paid that Friday, they get paid the next automatically, so they'll be on a week holdback.
How many total employees do we have right now?
With part-time, it's somewhere around 1,000.
1,000, okay.
Yeah.
And so your thought is to transition the new ones in terms of not an advanced pay, it's more of a retrospective pay?
Sheriff, EMS, highway, they already have holdbacks, and there's a few others.
Okay.
But then you've got about, I would say, anywhere from 100 to 250, somewhere in that range, or do not have holdbacks.
The fact that you would have two different ways that you pay your employees, does that create an issue?
Well, right now, the issues we've got is that's one, and dividing these on Kronos won't be an issue, we've already looked at that, but we have several issues right now because you have multiple personnel policies, and the multiple personnel policies have different end and start days. So they all get paid the same time, but there's a different amount of holdbacks for the ones that are held back, and even the advanced ones. So some start on Saturday, some start on Friday, some start at Wednesday at noon. So we have several personnel policies, and they all vary.
Well, I mean, just having been in the corporate world for a year or two, just changing the pay schedule itself can be disruptive. And the fact that you'll have employees getting paid on two different methods, I just think that needs to be clearly articulated in terms of how you plan to transition that over time.
It would be like, well, I think right now, all part-time are held back, period. So like if I hired a part-time person in my office, it would be a week hold back. All we've got to do is start treating their brand new full-time the same way, and we would tell them that at orientation.
Well, I'm agreed that that's the way to do it on a prospective basis, but I think in this interim period, that's gonna,
We orient all the new employees, so we would tell the new ones that came in about that. Like we do the payroll, we do the orientation upstairs, and we enroll them.
okay.
So the thing was, we'd just say, hey, there's a week in their department to hold back. And that would only be new ones, so the existing ones we're gonna leave as is, because even transitioning to Friday, I think that should happen, but I think that should happen after we get everybody on Kronos.
Yeah. Dr. Langford, what do we do at the schools? Do we do that same policy at the schools, or?
We have a variety of employees, obviously, but our pay cycle's the same, so we don't have the two.
You don't have it? Okay.
Yeah, we just have one policy for everything on that.
Gotcha.
And we run the nature of teacher contracts. It depends on where we start school. We're bound by that by law in terms of, what the state says.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit behind at the start of the year, but then we're a little bit ahead by the end of the year in terms of like if somebody quit, came and talked for a week or two and then quit.
So you're like your classified employees, do you pay them on a retrospective or a prospective basis?
So if it's, no, it's retrospective.
Okay.
Like, teachers, like, because they're on a 10-month contract that's paid over 12 months, that's a little different because,
Right.
they're basically spreading their pay. We're dividing by 12 instead of by 10. So like if you went from a 10-month job to an 11, like if you went from a teacher to an assistant principal, you would get an extra check because you basically completed your 10-month contract, but it was spread out over 2 months where you're starting. Our 12-month employees are paid real time,
Yeah.
but 10 and 11, it's a little bit different.
But below those contracted employees, your classified employees that are paid hourly,
Mhm.
Those are paid in the way that David's trying to move the county.
Right,
Got it.
right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we do a time sheet and pay off that.
Should have never been set up that way, but it's very painful. The least painful is just to get your new employees, because it'll never affect their pay. They know they gotta hold back like every other employee. Do those, and that's what I was saying, I had the same spiel almost 14 years ago, so we were talking about it the other day. If we'd have done it then, everybody in legal would have a holdback, everybody in the mayor's office would, everybody in IT would, but at the time I had the same. But I think this is the least painful, that they had a complete kickback about holding back and moving it. The number two they had was it was gonna be hard to keep up with, but if you're going to the Chronos system where the timesheets match up for that group, it's gonna get rid of that issue, and you have a date specific on them. So I think right now is the opportunity for the ones on the Chronos, we would declare a date specific, everybody hired after that date's automatically, got a hold back. So like if after, let's just say, January 1, and they hire somebody in an office that's already in Chronos, they would just hold back. It's not a holdback office, they would just hold back that person, the new one. When another one came onto the system, then any of their new ones would be held back, just like the part-time. And we do that with part-time anyway. As I'm saying, the majority of our staff are that way, because sheriff's number one size, EMS, highways, probably number 3, pretty close if not, between Union Circle. Well, ECC and then highway. And ECC's held back too, which is their consolidated dispatch. So that's one thing I think over time that will alleviate it. The only other way would be do a holdback, but as you're saying, do you really want to implement a system that's going to help everybody, but at the time hold back the employees, because it's going to give a sour taste in some of your employees' mouths. So what you're going to have is you're going to create a very bad environment for the system. That's my only reasoning, is I think that's not a good idea. It's going to create that bad feeling for the whole system. When the system came in, I didn't get paid for a week.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it's a brand new employee, they've got the system and they're on it.
Right.
And that's the only reason I'm not for doing that.
David, are you looking on this Chronos system, are you looking at the full automated system where they use an app to clock in, clock out?
We've got that already. The thing that we're running into right now is we wanted automated, even dropping it into Munis, but we have to do a lot of manipulation, and the reason that's caused is there's several things. One is these people that aren't held back is a big issue. We have to actually estimate a whole week manually and then put it in there with Excel and upload it. The other issue we've got is we're saying there's multiple personnel policies, so all the start and end dates vary. So if they've got varying start and end dates, like at the schools, you also gotta have the same one, so it'll pull it, you could pull it across.
Right, right, that makes sense.
We've have to massage the stuff quite a bit with checks and balances, which takes a lot of staff time and.
You know, I'm thinking with part-time employees in various,
Yeah, they're all held back in the part-time, so it's the full-time, about 100 to 250 of them is a real issue, but my thing is if we start now, and it may not happen, well, in the next 10 years, but it'll eventually, the people start retiring, and then number two, after the system, several years old, the system won't be tied to, if you decide to do a holdback, it'll give a bad taste in the way once you use the system.
Does that create duplicative duties for somebody though?
Upstairs?
To track Chronos on one part of your department and then tracking it?
Well,
I mean, it just seems like to me that if we're gonna wait till somebody retires, that doesn't seem too efficient to me.
we've got a system where they'll be in, I think they're actually like in different tracking, you have trackings that's based on those. So they'll be in like almost a different department. What we do right now is if you're in this one with no holdback, we'll pull your stuff from Cronus from the week before. You have to tell us if you're a full-time employee by Tuesday, if somebody quits or something, where we can take the leave or go back and try to recover it. And what we do is we actually have an Excel sheet based on your current pay. It'll estimate your next week, and then we have to adjust it backwards. So basically, it requires a lot of importing, exporting, but there's really, because of the multiple personnel policies and these non-holdbacks. As I'm saying, I understand what you're saying. It's a very big, it's time-consuming, expensive for the county, but my concern is anything on change management, if you hold back these 200 employees, they're gonna have a bad taste. So change management on Kronos is gonna be twice as hard to get them to go from manual to electronic.
Yeah, I hear you, but I just think that we've got to be thinking about how to transition this sooner than when folks retire. I mean, there are ways that you could hold back a day here or hours here and phase it in over time.
That's what I was thinking about, splitting a week, say 2.5 days or 3, 2 or something like that, and that way they don't have that bad taste of not being paid for.
It's not as bad.
If you did that, I would recommend you get everybody on Kronos and get it working, settled, policies all done, and then
I
Then start
like that
moving those.
idea. How
And
soon
then
can
start
we get
moving them.
Kronos in?
Well, we're gonna go down in here where we're looking for the rest of them.
Everybody else technically had to work a week, you know, before they got paid, so
Yeah,
you're just doing it further in your
yeah,
career.
yeah, like I said.
So your goal would be to transition all employees to this Kronos?
Yes,
model.
what's required by the private act, and that's
But
what you
you're,
really need to do.
you're right, but I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that we would not really change the current employees. They would, if they rotate off during retirement or turnover, that's when you would change it. So you're really not planning to transition the current employees onto this.
Yeah, we're gonna transition one just like we've got other ones on there. We've got, my whole office is on Kronos and there's no holdback. So what you do is if you're a full-time employee, the first week is your actual work. The second work's an estimate based on your, because you know you're making the same amount of hours, same number of weeks. You earn comp or overtime, it'll be handled the next time around if you have that. So basically the Kronos will track all that. Because when you do Kronos, you've gotta do an overtime payout, otherwise it rolls into comp time, so.
So all employees will use Kronos.
Yes, they'll use Kronos. The only question is, it's a lot more labor intensive without the holdback up there, and it's got the risk of people being paid to leave if we don't get a reported time or can.
I'm not sure I'm completely clear in terms of how you're going to handle the existing employees, whether they're going to be over time transitioned into the same, model where they have to, you don't get paid in advance.
Just like in finance, when we went from paper to Kronos, we came in and nobody's pay changed at all. So what we did was we pull, like if you got your weeks with your vacation and everything, you work in Kronos, we pull that first week down. The second week we estimate it. If there's any overtime, for instance, your overtime, you're allowed to carry up to, I think it's 240 hours, so it rolls into overtime. We do what's called an overtime payout with approval because they get to their balances. So like when I have some employees with maybe 220 hours, they're gonna go up, we're gonna pay them comp time or overtime out so they get paid. It comes to the same dollars. So what you're gonna do, the only time you end up with an issue is you can't do direct uploads, which takes a lot of time. The other issue is if I have an employee that don't have leave and they quit. Because we'd send the direct deposit out Wednesday, so I have to know pretty early Tuesday if they quit and don't have leave. Well, sometimes people may quit on Thursday. You may hire a relatively new person, think they're working, they've estimated they're gonna work the second week, and then they quit on Wednesday or Tuesday so late that we can't change the direct
Yeah.
deposit.
So I've litigated this too much, but at the end of the day, I just need to understand how we're going to transition the existing employees that are not going to phase in over time with the new Kronos.
What I would recommend right now is we find a date specific for the ones on Kronos. All your new hires, even your full-time, have to have a holdback. When you put somebody on Kronos, all their new people automatically have a holdback. The existing one, I think this needs to come back to the commission to determine when and how they want to handle it, but I think it should be after you've implemented the Kronos and have all your policies and everybody's used to it.
Sure.
Then you can separate the two. The Kronos can work that way, just like the manual are. It's just the manual sheets that's going on. Basically, the departments are doing the same thing with Microsoft Excel right now. They're taking 1 week and they're estimating another because they don't know what the week are going to work.
Now, did you give us last meeting how many people are in the advance pay or?
It's somewhere between 100 to 200 or 250. There's not, most of
So
your
it's-
people aren't because you've
Yeah,
got
right.
sheriff, EMS, ECC, and highway. Your 4 biggest departments have all got holdback. 2 of those, the 2 biggest ones are already in Kronos. IT's in Kronos, the mayor's office in Kronos, the legal office is in Kronos, finance. I think E911 is already. So we have several of the smaller ones. We're looking, we're gonna try to contact the registrar's office, start testing theirs, or we're ready to start testing them. And then trustee just went on recently, she was here just now. So we're still moving along slowly, but the thing is when we go, say if we go to circuit or clerk and master next, they have a completely different policy. So where we're planning to go after the registrars contact the libraries, we have some issues about the way they do leave. We've got to figure out how to handle in the system, but we're moving forward slowly, but with the resources we're moving very slowly. Because we're doing the day-to-day and then grabbing this as much as we can and programming it and working with consultants if we can find them. Which we've not had a lot of luck with that. The next one is something that's been discussed is grants. And we'll go through with the sections of it. We've got, and we were going to implement it several years ago, and I think I forwarded somebody an email because they asked us where we were at on it, and I can't recall who, but we were going to do what's called a project ledger that basically keeps up with all your grant information as it requires in the private act. And I'm still on page 1, and I'll go through those, but So basically, that's another one, we are requesting that there be some kind of policy on the departments entering stuff in the project ledger if they have a grant. We had that started, I believe, back in 19 or 20 or 21. And at the time, the office said they didn't have time to deal with it. I think I may have sent Ms. Boyd that email, I sent somebody the email, they requested it.
I saw it.
Then the other one is, if we're gonna move on, we need to update the purchasing policy for the highway department.
So
And these are just the
if-
points up here, up at the top still.
If I can step back to the project ledger, you did send me the emails and I saw that people had training. Would you have to retrain? I assume it's been a
We'll probably try to
while.
do that internally, because we know how the system works, and we've already got the stuff set up, so kind of the idea, if you look what the 2012 Act says, everything for precision accounting of the, grants have to be on the ERP. So what you're asked for from audit a lot of times is you have to have your grant contract. A lot of times they want the application, because the application, the contract sometimes refers back to the application occasionally. They do want correspondence from granting agencies, so you need to put those in there. You do need requests for reimbursements in advance, and you do need closure reports. The easiest thing to do, we extend the browser out to the end user with limited, where they can name those attachments of the standard. So, for instance, if they want a budget amendment, they put in their grant contract and application. And then they agree to put in, when they make requests for reimbursements, because right now it happens in the trustee's office, we get a deposit. Trustee's trying to figure out who it is, we're trying to figure out who it is, and we have to dig around and we find them, and the department's got the request that never made it up to us. So that's another issue we've got going on right now.
Is this project ledger something that the subcommittee would come up with procedures
I would
on how to
think
implement it?
procedures, and then they need to, like, all your procedures ultimately need to go to the county commission, like when the way like the purchasing would happen, you guys instruct the subcommittee comes up with the recommendations, you guys take the recommendations, or you amend it how you see fit. You approve it, you send it to county commission, then county commission ultimately approves, disapproves, or amends your policies. That's kind of the way the flow works. This would need to work something similar.
So on the grants themselves, the way you track and research those grants, do you actually look at their 990 to see that it's in good standing?
That would be for nonprofit. You mean nonprofits?
Yeah.
We do nonprofits internally, and that's one thing we do, like Jessica spends a lot of her time on her nonprofits and stuff. So like, for instance, when they send in their 990s and their applications, we actually have a project there, like each fire department will have a project ledger. They'll have in there their application, their 990 each year, and anything else that they provide as per the policy. The grants we're wanting to do similar to the nonprofits, because she does the nonprofits, but she don't have time to do the nonprofits. We're asking the granting people to scan in their stuff in these project ledgers.
Let me go a little different direction with my question. The 990 itself will tell you a lot about that entity.
The nonprofit?
Yes.
We redid the policy several years ago, and the thing about it, if you don't file a 990, the IRS can remove your nonprofit status on the third year. So when we were doing the policies, I recommended that the county commission require a 990. There's a few exemptions. There's a small 990, and also there's a rule, if you are a nonprofit closely related to a government, there's some exemptions of filing 990s. We have one or two of those, and then we also discovered one of the fire departments was part of the city. But every of our nonprofits right now, except for the one that's part of the city and the closely related, do have 990s filed with us. Because one had to go back and refile all of them.
Yeah, let me keep going here. So on the 990 itself, do you actually do an analysis of the financial stability of that not-for-profit, or are they in good standing before we grant the money back?
It goes to the budget committee to look at the just regular nonprofits, and then there's a charitable allocation committee that looks at all your charitable ones.
So the
we
budget
send
committee would be doing that?
So they receive the copies of the 990s and everything else. They're required to do one of two things. If they have an audit, they're required to provide it, which would have more details. If they don't have an audit, they're required to provide a form with some of that information signed by their chief financial. And then the county commission's policy here requires the 990 and additional information on top of that.
Gotcha.
So there's a pretty good process, but we don't necessarily, they're more looking about, is it a worthy, or do they think it's a project that the county should fund? Like, that's what and they look at the number of people served and the amount of money they have.
I don't believe they look at the 990.
They don't look at the 990, but we do.
I mean,
have
I
copies.
feel comfortable saying they don't look at it.
But we do have copies of it for them.
Well, I get it if
There
you're
were-
not gonna look at it, right? I mean,
Well, mine is I require to file because they've got to be a nonprofit, so if 3 years they haven't filed, if they're no longer.
so you're looking more at that piece
They're
versus the
statutory.
contents of the 990.
It's the same thing, even if they look viable, the county gives them money as a nonprofit, they're not viable, they go broke, we're losing the money anyway. And a lot of these nonprofits, the question is, a lot of them are looking, if the nonprofit has a whole lot of money, they probably won't get the money because they don't need it.
Exactly.
So if they look at their finances and they're bad, they're more likely to get it because they need help to get it there anyway. So
Or
those
they
big ones-
mismanage their money to get to that point.
But you
Right.
can't tell that unless somebody tells you. So kind of the thing is, the
Yeah.
reason the 990s aren't closely scrutinized or any of that is because it's kind of, a nonprofit's almost the opposite of what you would really expect in a lot of instances. Because if you come in, a nonprofit has $2 million and asks you for $2,000, are you gonna give it? But if they come and ask you for $2,500, doing a worthy project, have a accounting on their form for everything and have no money, unless you've got constituents coming and saying they're, I don't know, having keggers or something crazy, then you're not gonna know. But that's the reasoning we've never looked at those, because we just don't think there's a benefit, but we can look at a policy if you guys think there
We
is.
talked about it offline. if you like. Yeah.
Okay, number 7 was update the actual contract, policy to require all the contracts to come to, the finance department. We've already discussed that one earlier. Another one is, work with this committee to set a tentative schedule for the deadlines to have the timekeeping systems for each department, because occasionally when we contact the departments, there's a lot of them, there's a lot of policies, we have issues getting that moving, so we probably need to try to start setting deadlines for each individual department. We started looking at them internally. Right now, we're ready to contact one department to move forward, and the other one to try to start moving forward. And one we've contacted but got no response back from her. And I think she asked one of the committee members about us moving forward, I think it was, and then so we reached out to her and never received a response back, but we've actually looked at Kronos for her. The next one will be notify the full county commission, which is required with the.
Let's back up on 8. Who needs to set this schedule?
We'll bring you a tentative schedule, and I think the committee here needs to adopt this.
Yeah,
this
okay,
kind of
well, I just
approach.
wondered if it's some sort of policy, subcommittee.
Not really a policy, but as this financial manager, I think since this is gonna be involving many departments, we need to work with them hard to find reasonable schedules.
Yeah, I
and then
mean,
kinda
if you
get
don't
the
have a
committee-
goal, you're not gonna get something done. That's what we need to do, have a goal.
That's what we're saying, but right now, we've gotta get more data of what's required on some of it, because some of these, we're gonna have to do full-blown policies, and probably like ECC, we need Kronos to get involved, because when we originally talked to them, they wanted to use advanced timekeeping, so they did a PO for advanced timekeeping, and Kronos, we thought they were canceling the PO for advanced timekeeping, they canceled both, though, and they've got a temporary system over there, so that one's gonna be a little more involved, and that's your, third largest department. And it's got 24-hour shifts, it ends Wednesday at noon, I think, so it's a very, yeah, you've got 24-hour, you have people working, not 24, 12 hours. You've got people doing long shifts and odd weeks all over the place over there. So we're gonna wanna really set that one up with advanced timekeeping if they want it. The former director two ago wanted that, but the last one didn't, and now she's gone too. So we'll probably need to, I guess Mr. Guthrie's interim, but I don't know when they're, I guess it'll be a while for them. So it'll be a little while before they even have a director, so that one I would, even though they're the third largest, I would put in the back burner, because if you're hiring a new director, you probably wanna give them time to get acclimated and figure out what's going on before we start sending Kronos and everybody over there to start setting up a timekeeping system, because we're gonna have questions for their staff. Hey, how are you doing this manually versus what the policy says? How are you interpreting this policy? Well, we interpret it different. We need to figure out why, and stuff like that. We always end up that people are interpreting it or not following their policy, mainly because they just don't understand it. So the Kronos timekeeping takes longer than you think. We gotta turn all those into policies, and then we've gotta make sure they're compliant with wage and hour, their actual policy both. So it takes quite a bit of time.
I don't wanna step on anybody's toes, but have we asked them to simplify their policies that make it smooth? I mean, you're saying they don't understand their policies in some
There-
areas.
Well, that's some of them, but that was when we had the big county when it's been revamped. So we haven't done any of the other ones recently. And some of the offices, I can say without a fact, the things I've worked with them for, they're not gonna have any problems when we go into it. I would say, just to use an example, the county clerk's office, anything we work with them comes back excellent. So if we were working for them, we're working with them, we about say theirs are gonna be exactly on, but some of the departments aren't. And it's because they don't understand, or it's like, for instance, our main policy says if you can't observe a holiday, that your manager will work out a time off for you. So that's left for some discussion. Does that roll into comp, a separate holiday, but they get to use it? So the libraries have different interpretations of what they mean, and they have a lot of people that don't work on necessarily on those holidays, because they're not even open on those holidays, so they get another day. So we've got to program that, make sure they're following the policy, and that it is due to their overtime correctly. That's just a small change on our existing policy. But it's nothing that people are doing anything on purpose, it's just their
I
certain
understand.
policies.
Could we get that timeline by December or January, or when would a reasonable?
Yeah, well, I've got like a final date here, but I'm gonna get them to try to start breaking it into pieces
Okay.
by departments, but
For-
I'm saying, yeah, we've gotta get that
Okay.
broken apart.
That's what I
because
mean, the by department.
The problem we've got is we don't know what we've got till we start touching it. We look at their policies and we're amending it, and, like, the sheriff has a very, very complex policy, because even Kronos and Munis both mentioned that. It's very, very complex.
We'll revisit it next month.
The next one is, it's required by the private act that the committee will notify the county commission, school system, and all offices by, and I'm just saying newspaper, website, of what portions are applicable to, and it's just what it says in the act. One thing that when we do that we can do internally is on all your check stubs, we can put a memorandum telling where the policies are for purchasing an AP to make sure everybody's verified. And number 10, this is one we ran into a lot of times, is if you're gonna move forward, we need to see if we're gonna enforce the provisions of it. That's where we've kind of in the past just kind of stopped or deadlocked. Try to move a little faster. And the next 2 pages are actually what I would consider, and I don't know what pages it is. Is what I would call actually what the goals are in priority and what their importance. And if you look at the left on the column, it says priority and goals. Number 2, in the middle is where it's referencing the 2012 Act. I tell you where the status and why I have these dates. And some of these dates are pretty far out, but I can tell you what portions we can't complete and why until then. The first one is we need to update the standard operating procedures for all the new software. We just did a new payroll. We keep adding more Kronos, so we're slowed down right now to try to update all those SOPs all across the whole office. November 30th, everybody's required to have every existing SOP updated, and we'll be reviewing it. The reason you've got the March 2024 is because W-2s in this new system won't be prepared until January. They'll be out by the end of January, so February and March we'll be updating those SOPs to finalize those. So that's kind of where we're at. That's why that date's out there that far. The other one's cross-training on the timekeeping system. It's just an issue. If we're not asking for a new employee until July 1, we'll be moving kind of slow, but we want to do a lot of cross-training on the Kronos. We have one employee that's really trained and did a lot of the configuration. We have one employee we hired in that has some Kronos experience, but after that it kind of goes downhill because we just haven't had the time to cross-train them, I believe, adequately. And it's the same thing. Any system, you need to have good cross-training and SOPs for your internal controls. And then the private act requires us to have internal controls. And the next one will be additional cross-training on payroll and updating the purchasing policy.
Is this a person at each section, each constitutional?
No, that's for my office.
Just
We
your
have,
office, okay.
our office has hundreds upon hundreds of them. So we have an SOP with sets of internal controls for pretty much every process.
Okay, I just-
Talk to audit, we have a lot more complex than most, but there's a couple reasons when you hire a new employee. You do some training, but you give them those SOPs. They have the internal controls, they have all the directions. When I got here, we had very few written on napkins and what all over the place. And if you look, we've got SOP after SOP. So if you want to know how to enter the budget into Munis, because Munis has direction, they don't get all the controls we want. So there's a SOP named that.
So let me ask you, you mentioned that one of the issues is just cross-training or the ability or lack of ability to cross-train. By updating all your SOPs, I mean, you don't alleviate that issue of cross-training though, right?
No, that's on down here. So what we're doing, those we're trying to cross-train too. Yeah, by November 30th, we'll have all the SOPs back for review. Thing is, the management staff has to go back and review for internal controls or if we've got questions. And then the other thing, my kind of rule is if you've got a set of directions or internal controls and you have to write anything on them, they need to be reworked. You need to include that into them and resubmit them. So ours are all written, Word docs are not handwritten. So ours takes on, plus we put screenshots in and we have regular updates on the system, so all that changes. And we also have graphics on the website that needs to be updated that we've created that are actually videos. But kind of what we've got right now, because we did push to get some more Kronos, payroll, the payroll system is kind of over time just lagged us back. Because we had to do the day-to-day, but we try to push those forward too.
So what I think I hear is that you're trying to develop new tools for the employees where the cross-training need is not as severe, right? I mean,
They already exist, we're updating them all. We've done those. See, I've been here since 2009, and so probably 2009 through 2015, we redid it, but then we changed software packages. So 2016, 17, 18, we revitalized all the SOPs. Now we've changed the payroll system and went through several new iterations of the software.
Once your online tools get updated,
Oh, yeah.
I guess the bottleneck around cross-training, that will improve?
That's what we're hoping. Plus, we're hoping, like if this person comes in, we train the new AP person trying to pull these in, we're gonna try to, for a better word, slow walk to get all this cross-training in before we go forward. My concern is we're moving forward with existing staff, so we're prioritizing number one, the day-to-day, number two, implementation. I think we're gonna have to go day-to-day, SOPs, and then implementation. Because mine is, I feel, we've got good controls, but really for an excellent set of controls, you need good directions with all the internal controls written in there. They need to be reviewed, and then we need to randomly test to make sure they're all being followed. And we communicate them, but they help develop them, so they're communicated, but we give them to the new employees. So we're trying to meet all the things for the COSO internal controls too, so.
Yeah, you mentioned, go back and look at the controls in place and do some type of testing. Is that?
Yeah, your SOPs all have the controls in there.
So
yeah.
so is that within inside of your scope? I mean, do you have the bench,
Yeah.
the ability to do that with your existing staffing, or was that be a one-off to go test the controls? And you wouldn't test them all, I mean, you test a random sample of those, but I mean, do you have the bodies to do that?
Well, we do that. I'll go by and look for budget variances. That's how we find errors, and we find out what causes errors. And we see, and people have checklists and things we're looking for AP to come
Yeah.
through for internal controls. Like if you're an AP clerk, you know to look for certain things. If you're doing a bid, you know to look for certain things. You know to look for certain things for the possibility of error, certain things for the possibility of fraud. So we start looking for those things. So I'm not saying you spend like an hour on each invoice, we never get done, but you're looking for certain small things.
So in your case, you're looking at the exception report as the control.
We look for exceptions, and also for instance, we don't take invoices with changes on unless they're just crossed out in some reason. And we have all those controls. The problem we've got is at some point in the next couple of years, most entities, including us, probably need some more advanced tools, because with all the really good printers and sophisticated I mean, it's a lot easier if you think about it. You go and you print an invoice, it's equipment, and you put a corporation on there, so don't get a 1099. You get you an address somewhere, and if there's two of you involved, it's very hard for us to detect that. It used to be in the past, it wasn't, because the invoices were harder to create, but invoices got easier and easier. So, we've got controls, but mine is just like everybody else. We need to try to get better controls every day.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one last thing. You said that there were updates, 3 consecutive years there. How often do updates come?
We went from version 13 to something that was a full-blown update. Now they're not gonna do that anymore, but they do these regular updates, so some of your screens change.
Okay,
So
so just
it's not
smaller.
changing the full operation,
Okay.
but it changes the screens, and if you're gonna keep those for new staff members, when they change, we try to change them, so we try to get screenshots in.
Okay.
Nothing's better than a picture. If you've ever followed a set of directions with a picture that's a good one, and some written, it's a lot better than when you write, look at screen, whatever. And then the other one's updating the purchasing policy. Gold, and I've got I think me and Toby still kind of talk through a few things, is maybe try to get that done February 2024. To get back to this committee in February to send on to the commission. Because right now, it's gonna be hard to meet in December, I think, for everybody.
So the updated purchasing policy, does that have to go through the subcommittee?
What should happen is the subcommittee should come back with a recommendation, and then you guys take it or amend it or rework it. And then it goes to county commission, same thing, they take it, leave it, or rework it.
So when you look at February, you're looking at it hitting full commission at that point, or subcommittee, or this
I would
committee?
like to see
Just
it
to be-
come back, this committee in the February, that way you could hit March. for
Back
the
to this
commission.
table in February.
And the same thing, some of the things wouldn't be active to July anyway, if we're talking highway, we're not putting staff into July. We wouldn't be really doing any changes.
Okay.
Number two, if you look, we're wanting to do the ERP bid module right now. What we do is your PO and stuff's in Munis, but there's actually a bid module, and we want to do it electronically. But we're gonna have to do a hybrid, because there's a state statute that says minority-owned and small businesses, you have to give them the option of manual. And then also got to get the comptroller's approval if the system has control. So what I'm doing is, we want to do it as much as possible automated and let you do, electronic bidding and maintain it. If anybody sends us manual bids, our staff will scan those in to have them. But we do have to accept and put on our website manual bids because there's a statute for small and more young businesses that you will not. And we will, before we move forward on that, actually have to get the comptroller's approval. So the reason I've got the September date, we're moving forward right now with trying to do the electronic bidding and getting approval. The reason I have September, if we hire somebody in July, we'll need August and September to train if we're gonna migrate over the highway stuff. So it would take to at least September. My next one is complete implementation of the Munis contract module. That's what we were talking about, Eric, right now, about the controls. Right now, we attach your contracts to invoices. We put a few of them in the module and we contract them to POs. What we want to do is we're going to try to move to the point where we put all contracts in there with numbers and link them back. That way there's control for every contract. Because really when we ran into the issue of trying to get the leases and the software, so we're hoping to have that one done by January of 2024. We're already doing it in a small version. If a policy is adopted in January, requiring all of them to be sent to us, then we'll start indexing them all. We're gonna try to start indexing them by probably year, department, type, and give a number to them. That way we keep up the contracts better. We think we can do that with existing staff because we're already doing part of it anyway. The other one's full implementation of self-service, and I have January 2025. And the reason for that is because we're actually going to try to put some of the open enrollment in there. And our next open enrollment is in May, so we're going to do the open enrollment, try it, test it, after we actually do our open enrollment this year, which is this is June, so it'll be May 24th, so we want a whole year to try to get that all worked out. One of the reasons we're wanting a longer period of time, it may be much shorter than that, is because also if they're online, we want to work excessively with IT to make sure security's in there. Because right now, you can look at your check stub, but you don't have your social security number, and we think it's secure. We're going to shortly turn on the W-2s, and our understanding is IT's looked at it and it's secure, but we want to make sure each one's secure because it's got numbers on it. Then the other one is right here is migrate Highway Department's purchase order and PO function. Tentatively October 2024, basing on me and the highway superintendent working out any kind of issues that may ensue before then. And I've got the section started.
Hey, Toby, does that seem reasonable to you, in terms of timeline?
Todd, I think that's something that's just a working process, and as we work towards that goal, we'll just see, it's something that, I look at it from a different standpoint. It's something that's never been done in our history, and it's something that, can it be done? I think so. I've got friends that road superintendents in other counties that are very successful with the finance department doing their POs. They basically do a PO and get it within just a few, 10, 15 minutes, they got their PO and go home. So there's things that I need to look into, because one thing that we look at the compliance in a centralized location and how important that is for our government. Also, I look at it from safety factor. I do the most dangerous job here in the county as far as my people. Construction's number one. From OSHA standpoint, I'm a certified trainer. It's number one in the nation for deaths. So if we've got a 4,000-pound moving bullet that we work around, we're in traffic every day, nearly the whole time, and we have to work around that. And so the thing is, if we get an emergency situation and I need a PO quickly to fix a piece of equipment that's broke down in the middle of the roadway, I need to make sure that we can get in a timely manner. And that's some of the things that me and David's talking about, because it's a safety factor for me. Compliance one thing, but safety and the liability and something happening that could cost the county millions is a big deal.
Right.
And so us doing our due diligence and making sure that we
Gotta measure the way you do that,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's all that's important to me.
Right.
Is making sure we do it the smart, right way.
Now, emergency purchases, we've already got that addressed, because what it says on the policy already in the existing is if you have an emergency purchase before you even try to get a PO, you abate your emergency. So you're gonna go ahead and abate it, and actually, like if it's toward, he's gonna go ahead and call the repair people before he even gets a PO. If it's technically stuck in a road or somebody's in danger, Then he'll call to get a PO immediately after that and we'll start working with him. If we're closed, then he's got 24 hours after we're open back up to get it. So we've already dealt with some of them. Me and Toby just hadn't went through them well today. We went over there and started working on it, and unfortunately I had to go to the doctor with a small issue today. We've been trying to get together, but we've got a lot of those worked out, but we still need to go through them real well and see if there's anything else here or there that needs to be worked out.
How is it most of the other counties in the state?
Right now, all of them our size, they're all in the finance department except for one, which is Rutherford. And Rutherford has a central purchasing department in the mayor's office, is my understanding when I talked to them. But I'd have to verify, it's been a while, maybe. But there's actually a centralized report that I brought, I think, last month in here. I think the next largest one that does highway does their own piece is like the 11th largest, and they're about half our size or less. And then the other thing is the private act is pretty clear. The issue we've got right now, like Toby's POs, they don't encumber funds in the system, which is a compliance gap. Audit's not done anything about it, but I'm not really sure. Last year, the auditor brought that up to me, and I'm like, well, I told audit several years ago that was happening, and so they kind of dropped back on it. I don't really know why, but I guess because I brought it up several years earlier, nobody wanted it. But the auditor actually brought it up last year, but they didn't. But the same thing, don't encumber, and then the same thing, you really, it's best to have checks and balances and segregation of duties. You don't really want the same person writing the specs, bidding, and receiving the specs by herself. It's in control of the department. So really, your internal controls are very weak if you control that whole process. Development of bids, receiving, and awarding the bidder. That's why we're saying half a person too, and Toby needs to have his people too, because they would be developing specs, sending them over. So when you add any new controls, there's automatically going to be, but in the long term, it saves you issues. And then, to be fair to Toby, one of the issues Toby's had problems is he's new, and we're the largest ones doing it this way. And his main focus is he's saying taking care of the roads and his guys on the road, which should be, I guess, probably the other way around, your guys on the road and in the road. You know, to be safe. The B is never, I guess,
The safety's the biggest key for me.
and as I said, we can handle all those things, but me and Toby do need to get back together, and because we tried to today, but it was it's kind of hectic days for us, I think.
So that'll be something you do at the next meeting?
What I like to do is me and Toby meet and then get the purchasing policy, something workable back to the subcommittee and then back up to this committee.
Got it.
With a timeline of probably that October 1, if we can get everything worked out, and we can get training. And what I'd like to do is, when we do it, is have this committee basically say, right now I'm limited to one PO exception, and then also, if it's over, I can grant several times during that new period, basically say, hey, if he's got any reasonable reason, we scoot them on through and don't even bring it back to committee, just an automatic approval for a couple of months, just to keep it smooth, if that makes sense. Because you're gonna have any new process, and Toby don't wanna be down here with any process issues, so.
To keep us moving along, can
Yeah,
we
we move fast.
finish up the next 7 minutes here?
The next one's the project ledger, the same thing we're talking about. That is for finding what the private act says, the accounting system shall have real-time access to all documents necessary through the enterprise resource planning system to proficiently accounting for all grants. And what that means is, that means the audit of the grants too, if you're going through there. Well, your auditors is gonna ask for your application, your grant agreement, all your correspondence, your closure report, and all your requests for reimbursement. So that's something we're requesting, that a policy adopted that requires those grant administrators to provide those information. We were down that road several years back, but then we were halted by another official. That's all I want to say. I don't want to say anything negative. The next one is the reconfiguration of Chronos. Basically, you had a advanced timekeeping system over at the EMS station. The employee that does that is gone now. They are still running the system, but it's kind of needing a little bit of work and reconfiguration. They were required to take care of it. Part for that half employee, we're wanting to actually help the EMS out a little more on this. We don't know when we start looking at the two functions if there's enough to do both of those, but there is some configuration stuff that does need to be looked at the EMS timekeeping. Their advanced scheduling. We're responsible for Chronos. They were responsible for advanced time scheduling, not part of our system. But the thing we've got is our advanced time scheduling sends information over to the Chronos system for time.
Is that the town staff that you're talking about?
Yes, the telestaff. So we need to look at that, and that's why I have to be determined, talking to the payroll manager today. She doesn't think it needs a huge amount of configuration, just a few things here and there, but we do need a plan of how it's gonna be maintained long term. They are trying, but the same thing, you had the guy that was doing it left. They didn't even refill it, he was the assistant chief, they didn't refill the position, they actually cut the position for more overtime that year. So they actually cut the position, so the person used to do is gone and even the position. And there's the citations from the act. Fully integrate the Kronos, and we have a goal for June 2025, and what that means is we would like to have them all in there and running. We're not asking to do the whole back end, that would still be with finance, massaging those few existing employees for the non-holdback employees until this committee and the commission figures out what they want to do and when. But I'd like to get the system on up and running a little while before we address that, because I don't really want to tie the system back to people
And
having to check your back.
I don't want to take a lot of time with this discussion, but how long has this county been trying to implement Kronos?
We didn't really start on it until
Or a digital timekeeping?
probably about 17, and then we stopped for a while, and then because they were working on the private act, and then whatever happened, the whole thing. So I think probably out of that whole period, the last 2 years is when we've really been working on it.
But we've
Yeah,
been
we got
trying,
We've been,
you said 17?
yeah, and the issue's been, and that's the issue we've got into, we're prioritizing day-to-day and then implementation. Right now, we're gonna need to do day-to-day SOPs and then implementation. Putting the half of staff, that's one reason that we're gonna try to use that person to help push Kronos on through to get it done. So we worked on those 2 large departments and the ones in this building for the main thing. It took us really about 2 years. So we're looking at getting all these small departments, and I sent you the list last month. There's a large list, and they have several personnel policies. Clerk and Master has his own
Yes.
circuit. There's a whole group of them. They have very large variances in them. And then the last 2 is 2 that's required by the act, but I think they are the lowest priority. One is implement Munis fixed asset module. We're doing it on Excel. We own the module. It is required. It would be best to be able to pull it out of there. We would like to move that in there, but we consider that one of our lowest priorities. And then the last is the Munis budget module. Right now, we're entering the stuff back in, and we are doing it on Excel. What we want to do is move it over there, and I was actually at one point looking at extending the actual entry module to end users and had it set up. The problem we ran into is the payroll didn't do quite what we wanted to, so it's going to require some time, but I would prefer to get Kronos done before we tackle that one. Tackle the one with the budgeting or the fixed assets.
Well, the capital assets, David, I mean, what's the current process now?
We do them on Excel, and we ask for additions, deletions, and information from departments, and then for new purchases, we go to the general ledger and hunt for it. If we do the new one, then we could flag them in the general ledger, but the problem we've got to enter all the historical data and then reconcile it, and then train. We were at that point, and then we stopped because of various other projects. We were about, I'd say 50% done, and we stopped that project because we started, we ran excessive overtime and couldn't keep up and didn't want to provide additional staffing, so we just pretty much stopped. So right now, we're gonna have to rework all that. And it's the same thing, we started on the budget one too, and we stopped. It's the same thing, it's kind of, we prioritizing, and when we ran out of time, we had to stop.
So on the Excel, I mean, you've got the controls in place. It's just more manual, labor intensive, right? And you're wanting more of an automated answer or approach to it, right?
Plus the ERPs, the goal and the vision of the ERP system was that basically everything required for the financial, even for other departments connected to it, if they want to utilize it some way, would have all the data electronic and provided there you could look at fixed assets.
Yeah, maybe my question is a little different. You have comfort in the integrity of the number.
Oh, yeah, the numbers are
Okay.
fine. I don't think we're gonna run into the same thing we do now. If somebody disposes of it, the ERP has no way to capture unless one of us does that and get the information from the sales. The thing that's gonna be better is capturing. We do it manually right now, but the employees are very proficient at capturing. It just takes time, so we have somebody dedicated to it several weeks to capture all that data. And I've got an employee, but honestly, the amount of setup time is probably gonna be 2 years worth of time to do it, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have a system, and right now, we can go back to general ledger to get invoices, we can link your invoices to it, so it's gonna have some, there's integrity, it's good, but we have hard books, the fixed assets, it's gonna put it where you're all linked. over
And if
time.
it's integrated, it improves your overall control structure.
And you're gonna, because we're trying to move toward a true, and very few counties have done that, but we're trying to move it in.
I don't
We're trying to move
want
it
to stop the discussion here, but if there's any more questions, can we send them to David after the meeting?
So what
I
I'm-
think we've got some commissioners that need to leave in a few minutes here.
So what I've got to request is that this is, what you guys need to have is some type or format, or not a few minutes, of an implementation plan. And this is kind of possibly a starting point if you guys want to accept it or amend it, or, and then we can come back and bring this section and kind of work on it.
So
And add on to it and remove the upper portion.
can I make a motion that we go with this implementation plan as presented?
I'll second that, because
With,
they're on page 39 right there, where, I mean, I don't know what kind of non-movement we're talking about, that the comptroller and the commissioner of revenue would withhold funds from us and that kind of thing. I know this might be the same kind of thing with that act where as long as you're making progress toward making sure buildings are accessible for
That's the
handicapped people,
statute,
that kind of thing.
and I put
This
these
is a little bit
statutes in for
different.
two things. The one is, this year, and that's why I'm asking for the grant module, we had a very hard time getting together, because we have August 31st deadlines, and we're still working, getting the stuff for the software. Putting it on our books, because we need the contracts, and that's just saying, this is what happens if we can't comply, they'll withhold the money. The second statute I'll put in here real quickly is the one about, I only mention it for one reason, because the state statute says all departments are supposed to have a policy on waste. Waste is very broad, so my recommendation is this committee comes back, determines something reasonable what waste is that we and other departments should be responsible for reporting. And I'm not talking about somebody disagrees with what somebody's buying, I'm talking about waste. You need to define it down, because if not, you've got a runaway, we're not doing it, and you get fussed at, or if it's going the other direction, it's a runaway
Are
train.
you talking about waste like resource authority, or are you talking about waste?
I'm talking about if we see something in finance so pervasive, we think it's waste, there's a mechanism to report it, but then there's things that clearly define certain things aren't waste. Like you disagree if somebody buys something that's statutory authorized,
Okay,
that's not
what I
waste.
was, okay.
Like
I mean, that's
somebody expensing it.
And if I
Well, we wouldn't let them do that. Well, they did cross now, yeah.
if I could finish my motion.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, everybody's, so, if we implement this, but we need to, send to budget, we need resources. And it sounds like over the years, we've stopped and gone, and resources, if I go back and I look at the last month's report, we had resources and then they're pulled off. They go over here, and then there was the IT people that we read about last month that disappeared. So I'd like to send a request to budget. I'd like to look at a motion to implement this plan and send to budget a request to fund a position for the rest of the year. For half a year.
I'll amend my second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Anybody abstain? All right.
David, thank you, this was really helpful.
Yeah, there definitely
And
was.
before we go, and I know I've got a seat out there too.
Okay.
Just really quickly, I know that at the beginning, we discussed moving our meeting to 5:30 in December, because a lot of these items looks like they're actually rolling to old items. Section C, the policies. Can we, instead of 5:30, move that to 5 o'clock? Because I think we're gonna need the time.
You go with five?
Yeah, there's no problem. I was just trying to keep some time.
Just
there.
because those look like they're gonna roll.
Subcommittee probably won't meet to January because of December, when we're talking about that. So if they don't meet to January, it won't be back here to February, the purchasing.
Okay,
And they probably need to develop a policy on waste and,
okay.
Do we need to do anything with this?
Then leave it at 5:30.
oh, yeah, we need to develop it.
Yeah, I guess we're covered.
And everything that's left, I move to old business if anything's left.
Well, there's one thing, if I can do it like 2 seconds, and I'll just explain, it's the very last item. What happened was, we got the ARPA funds, and Toby was given lots of asphalt funds. Our policy says that the highway public works funds exempt from our policy. Toby was thinking that meant anything the highway expended, which wasn't, so when he did his ARPA, me and him were talking, he said, we're bidding the, was it Upper Station Camp?
Yeah.
And I thought he meant he was bidding it through my office, through our purchasing person. Well, he bid it himself. Well, because of the weather, the bid was fine, other than they did the bid, because we've looked at the bid. followed all the ARPA rules and everything else. The only issue we've got is he did the bid, but he was going to run out of time if he didn't go ahead and proceed forward. He wasn't about to finish up for station camp. So the question was, and I sent it to Colin, and Toby agreed too, one, if you guys can grant exemptions for anything, so if you grant that, we can pay it out of the ARPA. If you don't, he's gonna pay it out as Highway Public Works. And since we've got a time limit on ARPA, I'd prefer to see if you guys could pay it out of the, ARPA, so I'm just asking you guys to grant an exception that he bid the ARPA stuff.
I'll make the motion.
Does everybody understand the motion on the floor? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Do we have a motion in the meeting?
For clarification, the 18th, 5 or 5:30?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
We got a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
And if, well, I'll go back and try to figure out which ones we didn't pick up tonight.
Sorry, you guys have to do that already.